Welcome to the Hidden Truth Show podcast. What we're about to play for you is an excerpt from our interview with Dr. Jack Drescher. He is a psychiatrist and a leading expert on gender and sexuality. State legislatures have been relying on his expertise in passing laws that make it difficult for parents to treat children with gender dysphoria. They're only permitted, for instance, in the state of California, to provide gender-affirming care. When they say gender-affirming care, that does not mean affirming the child's gender that he was born with. It means affirming the gender that is in the child's head, allowing the boy to wear a dress, change his name, provide hormone blockers, and ultimately change his genitalia. You'll see in this interview, though, that Dr. Jack Drescher himself, who has been relied upon in the passing of these laws, acknowledges that the laws have gotten ahead of the science.
Well, it's always the parent's choice which one to pursue, because there's nobody mandating to the parents which clinic they should bring their child to. And that is, in fact, it's an interesting question, because apparently the number of children who are appearing in gender clinics today who have already been socially transitioned by their parents now exceeds the number of cases that are in the research literature of these gender clinics. So parents are already doing things before they even come to see the experts, and they're making decisions. And the ones who are socially transitioned before puberty, this is called a gender affirmative approach. It's practiced in many clinics here in the United States. And they basically say, this is who your child's true gender is, and we're going to, help you talk to the school and get a name change and do the assignment. And the question there, something I've written about, is since some of the literature suggests that early social transition increase the possibility of persistence, are you sort of solidifying the transgender presentation by doing a social transition? Again, the research is not clear. We don't know whether that's the case or not. And the people argue, well, if the child grows out of it after puberty, they can just transition back, as if this were a simple thing to do, when we know that transitioning in one direction requires a lot of psychological and family and social support. So that's my main critique of the gender affirmative approach, that they don't really know how to tell the difference, and that they might be pushing some children in the direction they do not necessarily need to go in. But at the same time, the Canadian approach, which was, to deny children, to try and change children at an early age, they have never done double-blind controlled studies to see, whether that technique actually prevents it, because, even the Dutch clinic, which doesn't do that, has children who grow out of it. So as I said, so you look at what people are doing, and basically people are doing what they feel like doing, and they're doing what they think works.
So there just isn't enough science yet to determine which of the three approaches is the proper approach, and it needs to be left up. Ultimately, it's up to the parents to choose which one.
I would say that's pretty clear. I mean, I've written some textbook chapters on the subject, and I said, and you give a test, the chapter, you give a sample history of a child. What do you do with this child? And then then you can outline the three different approaches that people use, and parents get to choose.
So what about these laws that are being passed in the various states? California was the first one, and they talk about it being sexual orientation change efforts, and at least in California, that's defined to include efforts to change behaviors or gender expressions.
Yes.
So if the parents wanted to pursue option one, which is to try to help the child to identify with his biological sex, but the child is it's a boy and wanting to wear dresses, isn't that the parents trying to change gender expressions, and that would be prohibited treatment in California?
Well, first of all, I don't think the laws that currently exist are about, 14 states, Washington, D.C., and I think Ontario, and a number of municipalities that make it, that prohibit a clinician from trying to change. So so the laws are based on licensed clinicians. It has nothing, I don't think the parents necessarily are at risk. The laws are very interesting, because the laws are, starting with the California law, are based on the idea that they use position statements of the mental health organizations like the American Psychiatric Association and the American Psychological Association, which are all based on positions taken regarding trying to change a child's grown-ups, not so much children, but anybody's sexual orientation, not on gender identity. What the laws did is they quoted all the reports, and then they tagged on gender identity and gender expression, at the end, even though the position statement, I don't believe either my APA, American Psychiatric, or the other APA have a position on what to do about children officially. So in this way, the law has moved ahead of the science, is different. It's not about the science. The law is about, I think, really trying to, protect children based on, a wish to protect children from unknown treatments that might be harmful.
Mm-hmm. So at least that part of any law you would kind of disagree with, that if this is preventing treatment A of the three options for treatment of dysphoria, that you believe these laws are going too far in that regard.
I don't know. I've actually been asked, I wrote an amicus brief for the California law, and when New Jersey passed a similar law, the Attorney General's office asked me to write an expert defense of the law. In both cases, the laws were challenged in court and the laws were accepted. No, I do think trying to change a child's gender identity can be harmful to the child. I do think that. So in that regard, even though that's my personal opinion, that's not necessarily based on science, but it is my opinion.
Yeah, so I think it's a risk when governments step into science and start dictating science to people when things are unresolved and taking options away from parents.
Well, exactly. I recently was asked to blind review an article for an ethics journal that said that in the event that parents would not give their children puberty suppression, the state should step in, and overrule the wishes of the parents. And my response was, I thought this was an interesting article, but that an article like that should not really be published as a sole article. You need other opinions simply because, it's a controversial subject about what to do with the kids. And to say the state should take an action when there isn't enough medical science to support the action, or when the medical science is controversial, is, I think, something that is a political question. It's not a medical question.
Mm-hmm. So again, that would be a situation where you think the government's going too far.
Well, I think I would. I don't want to answer that question because I don't know if the government is going too far. I think the government has to carefully consider. I think you need more careful consideration. This is what I find in this area. There's not enough weighing of different ethical restraints and ethical directives in making the decision. So one could argue, yes, that it is going too far, but one could also argue that, here's a child who's suffering, and allowing the child's suffering to continue because we don't have enough information is not necessarily an ethical position to take either.
Yeah. Well, it's a child that needs treatment of some sort, and that treatment may wind up being drugs and surgery, and the state isn't seeking to ban the drugs and surgery, but for some reason the state seems to want to ban the psychological therapy.
Well, there is no evidence that psychological therapies to try and change a gender identity works. Just like there is no evidence to show that trying to change a psychological therapy to change a sex.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about. I mean, basically, there isn't enough science on any of this, so that's why it would just seem to me shutting any of it down before there's enough science. Even the APA's own report says that there's 3 possible treatments for this, but the state of California is about to shut down one of the 3.
Well, that
the
province of Ontario did shut down the Toronto clinic back in 2015 and fired the longtime director.
How did you feel about that?
Well, I think it was not a good thing. I think that the arguments that they made, because they passed a law based pretty much on the text of the California law, and then accusations were made against the person who ran the clinic, Ken Zucker, who was the charge of the DSM committee, who was a person reviled by the transgender community. I don't think he got a fair hearing, and I think, again, we don't have enough information to know. I personally don't find that particular model of treatment compelling, But I think that they did, they had a number of patients who came out of the clinic who were satisfied with that treatment too.
If you enjoyed that part of the interview, tune into the Hidden Truth Show podcast to get the entire interview. It's available wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for watching. I'm Jim Breslow.